I read Steppenwolf again for like the fifth time or sixth, or I don't know. I'm not really keeping track. But you know Steppenwolf? Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. I don't know why I come back to this book, but every few years I find myself coming back to it, rereading it. It's certainly a story that lends itself to multiple interpretations, some of which I will share with you today. There might be some minor spoilers, but I hope that whether you've read Steppenwolf, whether you've just heard about it, or whether you have no idea what it is, there might be something here for you if you're crazy enough. Because after all, this is for madmen only. Or mad women, you know. I welcome all genders when it comes to insanity. I'm Chris Crescent. This is Talking Sudoku Blues. Let's get into the Magic Theater. I'd like to recommend Steppenwolf, first of all, on the basis that if you've never read, like, literature, capital L literature before, I think this is a great place to start. It's a book that lends itself to many interpretations, and it's pretty small. It's, not very long. You've got 248 pages in this translation by Basil Crichton. If you're looking for a place to start with, like, old German literature or old European literature, you could do worse than start with Steppenwolf. I am not one for plot summaries or author bios or anything like that, but I do want to say just a little bit about the context. This book was published in the 1920s. In English, it was published in 1929, and between the wars. That's important to note. And the book structure is basically an embedded narrative, which means a book within a book. And in some cases, a book within a book within a book. There's a guy who finds this manuscript, and he has lived with this other guy who calls himself the Steppenwolf. That's our protagonist, Harry Haller. So Harry Haller lived in this, he rented a room from this guy and his aunt. When he left, he leaves behind this manuscript. And so this book is... First, it's the young man who finds the manuscript, and then it's the manuscript itself. The young man sneaks into the Steppenwolf's room. A southern landscape, photographs of a little German country town. Apparently Haller's home hung there, and between them were some brightly painted watercolors, which, as we discovered later, he had painted himself. Then there were photographs of a pretty young woman, or rather girl. For a long while, a Siamese Buddha hung on the wall, to be replaced first by Michelangelo's Knight, then by a portrait of Mahatma Gandhi. Books filled the large bookcase and lay everywhere else as well. On the table, on the pretty old bureau, on the sofa, on the chairs, and all about the floor. Books with notes slipped into them, which were continually changing. The books constantly increased, for besides bringing whole armfuls back with him from the libraries, he was always getting parcels of them by post. Yep, it sounds like my room. I like how the kid knows that the notes in the books are always changing. So, like, how often does he sneak into this room and, like, look through Harry Haller's book collection, And then the next section is Harry Haller's Records. Harry Haller's Records for madmen only. And that begins sort of a kind of diary of sorts, where Harry Haller talks about, he's coming back to this town that he has been in periodically, and wandering around one night, he heads to this old tavern that he has frequented many times. On his way to this ancient little tavern, he sees these strange kind of glittering letters on an old stone wall. It says, "Magic Theater, entrance not for everybody." And then as he kind of squints at it and sees that there are some letters then reflected on the asphalt, he makes out, "For madmen only." And he waits, but he doesn't see anything else, and so he wanders to this little ancient tavern. And I love this description. "I sought out the little ancient tavern where nothing had altered since my first visit to this town, a good 25 years before. Even the landlady was the same as then, and many of the patrons who sat there in those days sat there still, at the same places before the same glasses. There I took refuge." It's just... What was the other Hermann Hesse book? Was it Demian or Beneath the Wheel, where he's like, at the beginning, he's like, if you took this man who seems like, this usual kind of working class guy, and you could exchange him with like any one of his neighbors, and they would all like keep the same routines and live the same lives, even if you like took them out of their life and replaced them with someone else. Like they would do exactly the same things. And I love how Hesse like criticizes that kind of. But anyway, so we can see now the wandering Steppenwolf, and we can see there's these little bits of like fantasy and illusion that are following him. And so this brings me to the first interpretation of this story. The first interpretation would be the struggle with identity. Harry Haller is a man split into two parts. He is a cowardly, weak, middle-aged man, and he is also a kind of a sad, lone wolf. He believes himself to literally be a wolf or have a wolf spirit. Not a werewolf, but just, he has this animal desire inside of him. And whenever the man feels happy or comfortable, the wolf kind of bites at him. And whenever the wolf gets too kind of wild and dark, then the man tries to kind of rein him back in. And so he has these two selves. Hesse often used existentialist ideas, that you make your own reality, you make your own fate, as it were. The people must break free of their external constraints in order to find their true selves. And in this book, he seems to take somewhat of a Buddhist view, which is in order to really find the center and the spiritualism at the heart of everything. You have to sort of go through all kinds of experiences, and you have to suffer. You have to experience both pleasure and pain in large amounts, and then you might be able to kind of leave it all behind and find that true center. It's kind of an acceptance of one's own inner desires and inner conflicts, I guess. So I should mention around that time of the when he's at the tavern, he goes a wandering, and he finds this guy wearing one of those, those like signboards, and it says, "Anarchist Evening Entertainment, Magic Theater, entrance not for everybody." "I've been looking for you," I shouted with delight. "What is this evening entertainment? Where is it? When?" He was already walking on. "Not for everybody," he said dully with a sleepy voice. He had had enough. He was for home, and on he went. "Stop!" I cried after him. "What have you got there in your box? I want to buy something from you." Without stopping, the man felt mechanically in his box, pulled out a little book, and held it out to me. I took it quickly and put it in my pocket. While I felt for the buttons of my coat to get out some money, he turned in at a doorway, shut the door behind him, and disappeared. And this is when Harry receives the treatise on the Steppenwolf. And this basically takes up the next, how many pages? That's long. From page 47 to page 75. It's this long book. The book within the book within the book. No, the book within the book that's within this book. Yes, that's the one. And this is my least favorite part of the book. I want to warn you, if you're reading this for the first time, the story just begins, and then Hermann Hesse drops this, here's just, the entire background of, what this guy is, and, how he's got this dual nature, he's got this wolf inside. Some stranger has written this about Harry Haller without, his consent. And it really slows the whole narrative down, because you're just now I've got this 30-page chunk of thing to read that just tells me the backstory of the main character. You're not supposed to do that as a writer. You're supposed to show and not tell. But Hesse just, for 30 pages, he just tells you, lays it out there. So anyway, that's my least favorite part of this thing. And then, let's see, it ends with Harry Haller back in his apartment, and he's kind of amazed by this thing that he just read, and then he picks up this poem that he wrote. So then now you have to read a poem. It's kind of bad, at least the way that it's translated. It rhymes, and it's a little bit, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly what this is supposed to be, but he himself says that it's not a very good poem, so maybe it's supposed to be bad. Anyway, it's also about the Steppenwolf. So Harry Haller has written a poem about the Steppenwolf, and he has discovered this treatise on the Steppenwolf. And if that doesn't beat you over the head enough, I don't know what else you need. At the end of the treatise, it kind of comes to the point that the Steppenwolf is a fiction. The division into wolf and man, flesh and spirit, by means of which Harry tries to make his destiny more comprehensible to himself, is a great simplification. On to the second interpretation, which is the nature of reality versus illusion. And this is where I think a lot of readers divide. So some may view it as a kind of critique of escapism and how you should be more present and you shouldn't let illusion and distraction in. Whereas others would say through illusion and through exploring your deepest self, you may be able to come to a more clear vision and you may be able to reach a higher state of thought. So this part is really kind of I think this is where you can write your essay for English class. I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm going to jump ahead to meeting the main female character. I feel like if I was a woman, I probably wouldn't like this book because all of the women are very drawn very flat and very kind of they don't have much depth. They're just there to serve the protagonist and the story, and it's kind of frustrating. I wish they were a little more fleshed out, I guess. Now, I don't mean it that way. I mean well-rounded characters with lots of dimension and backstories. That's what I mean. I don't mean fleshed out, I've been doing this. I did the Robert Crumb video, and now I'm just thinking about fleshy women this whole time. I'm just trying to hype my other video. If you want to check out my video on the R. Crumb handbook, I just finished making it. So we jump from lowbrow psychedelic comics to highbrow German literature on this channel. So he meets Hermine or Hermine. Jesus, how much more of a possessive name can you give her? Mine. Hermine. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm going to say Hermine, but it's the feminized version of Hermann. So this girl kind of looks like the Steppenwolf's old childhood friend Hermann, but it's a female version. Does this woman really exist, or is it all in his mind? You have to read the book to find out. But anyway, they sit at this little bar and they start talking. And she kind of makes fun of him gently, and she convinces him to both drink and eat and also sleep. So he kind of curls up in a booth while she goes dancing, and he has a dream about the German writer-philosopher Goethe. The thing that I want to say about this is that when he first meets her, his first words to her are, "May I?" I asked and sat down beside her. "Of course you may," she said, "but who are you?" "Thanks," I replied. "I cannot possibly go home. Cannot. I'll stay here with you if you'll let me. No, I can't go back home." She nodded as though to humor me, and as she nodded I observed the curl that fell from her temple to her ear, and I saw that the withered flower was a camellia. From within crashed the music, and at the buffet the waitress hurriedly shouted their orders. "Well, stay here then," she said with a voice that comforted me. "Why can't you go home?" "I can't. There's something waiting for me there. No, I can't. It's too frightful." In this, a couple paragraphs, he has said can't or cannot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And I think that's kind of clever. What he's saying he can't go back to is suicide. Not to spoil too much, but I think it's interesting that he says can't, cannot, because that's an interesting way to begin his character arc. He's reaching his absolute lowest, and now he can only either kill himself or go up from there. So with Hermine, he will begin a new journey. I mentioned that he has a dream of Goethe, and that's not really so much worth talking about, except for the fact that I really like the ending. Goethe starts talking about how he's one of the immortals. "We immortals do not like things to be taken seriously. We like joking. Seriousness, young man, is an accident of time. It consists, I don't mind telling you in confidence, in putting too high a value on time. I, too, once put too high a value on time. For that reason I wished to be 100 years old. In eternity, however, there is no time, you see. Eternity is a mere moment, just long enough for a joke." And this reminded me of that quote from Jesus' son. Generally, the closest I ever got to wondering about the meaning of it all was to consider myself the victim of a joke. And the humor of the immortals and the humor come back again and again, which I take to be the absurdity. You should be able to laugh at the absurdity. You should be able to laugh at the illusion. I think that's what Hesse is getting at. It's important to laugh and to not take things too seriously. Toward the end of the book, he does end up entering the magic theater that is for madmen only. And that's a really interesting sequence. And a lot of people have complained. This might be a minor spoiler, but about the ending. A lot of people have complained that this is a very anticlimactic book. It builds and builds and builds and then sort of just leaves you, which I understand. But I would say that some of the sequences within the Magic Theater make up for the fact that the ending is sort of strange and anticlimactic. It's very surreal. It has almost like a David Lynch quality. I also thought of like Harlan Ellison and some of his early stories where he just goes mad. So what ends up happening is there's this big masked ball in the town, and Harry gets kind of stuck in there, and he gets sort of tortured by the crowds. And at about 1 o'clock in the morning, he's ready to go home when he gets this message that Hermine is there. She's in hell, so he has to go find her and descend into hell. And long story short, what ends up happening is Hermine, Harry, and this guy Pablo, who's a jazz musician, they all hang out together after the party sort of dies down. And in the wee hours of the morning, they drink this strange liquid that I assume is absinthe, but I'm not really sure. And smoke these long yellow cigarettes, which also I'm not really sure, maybe opium. But opium is you smoking a pipe, but I don't know, marijuana, but that wouldn't make you hallucinate. But anyway, they basically take some hallucinogens, and they enter the Magic Theater. And Harry has to confront his psyche. He has to confront himself. There's all of these doors that his personality is sort of splintered into all of these different parts, and he can go into any door, and he can sort of face these different aspects of himself and his life through these almost like simulated illusions, very complicated illusions. That sequence actually kind of throws back to the dream that I was talking about with Goethe. Goethe has this little wooden box that he opens up, and there's like a woman's leg inside. And Harry gets very fascinated by the leg, and the leg, may or may not change into something else. It's very surreal, and all of these sequences kind of weirdly fit together. Hesse seems to be playing with this idea of the illusion versus reality on all levels, not just in the fact that Harry believes himself to be a kind of a werewolf inside, but also just the way that he finds meaning is through illusion, which is kind of interesting. The third interpretation that I want to talk about is the quest for self-actualization, the search for meaning. Harry has all of these different encounters with different characters. I didn't even mention some of the characters that he's involved with, but basically each one of them makes him question what his existence is and why he is who he is and why he has left certain parts of himself behind. For example, when he meets with this professor that he used to have these long conversations about Hindu mythology with, and now he's sort of disgusted by the fact that the professor is becoming very political, and Harry is writing these anti-political screeds in the whatever newspaper. And so how do you self-actualize, especially as a 50-year-old man who believes that he has a werewolf inside of him? We know that his self is completely divided. He's also lost his family. He used to have a family, he used to work a job, and now he's just a wandering Steppenwolf. His woman, what's her name, Erica, that he barely sees, and we really don't get to know her at all. Again, the flat female characters, one-dimensional. He says that she accuses him of not living in the practical world. So he's an intellectual. He only lives in the world of illusion and dreams and thoughts, philosophy. These things are not real, and she wishes that he were more practical. Even in the world of illusion, the world of aesthetics, it's hard for him to find meaning. There's a sequence in the middle toward the end of the book where he talks with Pablo, the jazz musician. Harry asks Pablo, earlier, I wanted to talk to you about music, but you wouldn't talk to me. You wouldn't answer my questions. You wouldn't respond to me. And Pablo says, you see, in my opinion, there is no point at all in talking about music. I never talk about music. What reply, then, was I to make to your very able and just remarks? You were perfectly right in all you said, but you see, I am a musician, not a professor, and I don't believe that, as regards music, there is the least point in being right. Music does not depend on being right, on having good taste and education and all that. And then Harry says, indeed? Then what does it depend on? On making music, Herr Haller. On making music as well and as much as possible, and with all the intensity of which one is capable. That is the point, monsieur. Though I carried the complete works of Bach and Haydn in my head, and could say the cleverest things about them, not a soul would be the better for it. But when I take hold of my mouthpiece and play a lively shimmy, whether the shimmy be good or bad, it will give people pleasure. It gets into their legs and into their blood. That's the point, and that alone. Look at the faces in a dance hall at the moment when the music strikes up after a longish pause. How eyes sparkle, legs twitch, and faces begin to laugh. That is why one makes music. And I really love this because for Pablo, this American jazz, which was very popular at the time, it was very fashionable, but it was not like accepted amongst the music critics and the music professors, because classical music is, where it's at for them. But for Pablo, it's all one. He appreciates classical music and jazz and the foxtrot and the shimmy just as much as he appreciates Handel and Beethoven and all of the old masters. And Harry can't really accept that at first. But I think that what he says about having passion and playing music is really the most important thing, and I feel that way about music too. I never see art as highbrow or lowbrow. Like, to me, I hate rankings, because I feel like, if you like it, you like it, and if you don't, you don't. If it speaks to you, that's great, and if it doesn't, then leave it. I don't even really like genre that much. I don't like to talk about genre because I believe that music is just an experience. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's just how I think of it. Music is music, of course you can break it down into different genres and you can, separate it and analyze it. But it's also just really fun to just discover and just to be inside of music. And on this channel with Jasmine, we have tried very hard to show our appreciation for music in a little different way. That we try to talk about it in depth, without ranking, without judging, as much as possible, and just share the things that we like and the things that we think. So that's a little side note that I just wanted to say. And it's through music that the Steppenwolf meets these women, Hermine and also Maria. Maria is a dancer, and she comes from a poor household, but she sort of lives off of various men, and she also takes part-time jobs when she needs to. And she joins these dance parties and these wild nights that he becomes a part of. They take drugs together, they sleep together with Hermine's permission. And it's through this kind of music as actual music and music as metaphor for this very rich, new, very colorful life that Harry starts to lead, that leads him toward his maybe self-actualization. I can't really say if he ever gets self-actualized, but he's certainly on the path to self-actualization. What the hell happens at the end of this book is up to anyone's guess. It becomes very surreal and kind of insane, but I love that. And I never really feel like I'm getting that much out of Steppenwolf, like concretely, but I just really like the journey. I like the strangeness of the images, and I like the way Hesse writes kind of poetically. It's a book that I've come back to again and again. And I just wanted to share with you a couple interpretations today and see what you think about Steppenwolf. And also to recommend that, if you ever want to read capital L literature and you feel intimidated by the giant canon, as they say, that's out there, I recommend Steppenwolf. I read it when I was a teen, and then I have come back to it every few years. I read it again, and the older I get, the more it changes. And, sometimes I like it a little more, and sometimes I like it a little less. But I think that it's important to dig into these old books and find something in there that speaks to you. And strangely, this story actually speaks a lot to the present moment with all of the craziness that's going on in the world, the shady politicians and the strangeness of how the culture is splintering and things are changing so rapidly. You don't think about a book from almost 100 years ago being very relatable today, but the themes of feeling lost and feeling alienated in this world seem to remain the same. in any generation, in any time period. So, yeah, that's it for me. Steppenwolf, highly recommend. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again.